recipient and lung transplant 6 months ago. Thanks for coming.
He brought his own audience. That's a good thing.
Any people in the South?
Preschool heart transplant, March '96.
But on the pup, I just got put on the list Thursday for a heart transplant.
Very good.
Warren Sweeney got lung transplant, HOP 2001.
My name is Bernie Seigel. I was in the lung transplant November 8, 2008. I say thank you, God. Thank you, Dr. Thacker, Dr. Griner, nurse from every nurse at the hospital. I love you. Thank you.
Brings his own audience, his own fans. That's even better. Dan?
Celia for coming.
Yeah.
Dan Smith, heart transplant recipient, November of 2005.
Ken Golden, heart transplant recipient, 2001.
And we are with Celia. This is granddaughter Naya, granddaughter Siani, her daughter Jacqueline, my sister, and we're all family of Celia. She had her lung transplant also in November of 2008 of last year at Temple Hospital.
Glad you came out with her. Good.
Thank you.
Ruth Miller, heart transplant, November 01, Temple.
Jerry Cohen, heart transplant, June of 2000, HUB.
Joanne Clemens, heart transplant, November 2006, Jefferson.
Al Hirsch, heart transplant, August of 1997, Holland.
Carl Rouse, heart transplant recipient, Temple University Hospital, June 05.
Harry Atkinson, heart transplant, April or
And Jim Gleason, heart transplant at HUP, 1994, October. Doctor, introduce yourself and give us some background, and it's yours for the evening.
Thank you. I'm a cardiac surgeon who's trained in Bombay, in India. And then I came to United States in 1990. I worked at Texas Heart Institute with Dr. Denton Cooley for a period of 1 year. Then at University of Alabama, Birmingham for 1 year. And then at Portland, Oregon for 2 years. And then I went back to India and I was practicing cardiac surgery for 10 years. In 2004, July of 2004, I came to Stanford to observe heart and lung transplantation. To see, because there was no transplant program in India, and heart transplant and lung transplant had been going on in the world for more than 40 years. So I was just thinking that whether it's possible to do the same thing in India. I spent 6 weeks at Stanford University, and then I applied for various positions. I got a job at University of Pittsburgh. In 2005, July, I joined University of Pittsburgh, and luckily that year, Pittsburgh became the largest center doing lung transplantation in the United States. And in the following year, Pittsburgh became the largest center doing lung transplant in the world. It did 117 transplants that year. Then I was offered a position at Temple University by Dr. Kleiner, and I joined here at Temple University doing heart and lung transplantation as a faculty. And what I'm going to talk to you about is what Jim called me and told me that we would like you to speak on topic. I said, what topics have they already heard? So he said most of the topics have been covered by very more eminent surgeons than myself.
Oh, I didn't say that. I said, what do you feel comfortable and passionate about? And he came up with a title.
So he said most of them have heard about heart transplant, lung transplant, all those basic topics. So what are you passionate about? I said, I'm passionate about helping my patients live to be 100 years. And I don't know if I have any secrets. I don't have any medications or some secrets, but what I'm going to share with you is what I genuinely believe. I'm not talking to you as a doctor, but I'm talking to you as one human being to another. So everything that I say applies to me as well as it does to you, equally.
Now, let me, if I may, think about this for a second. And I went through an exercise one time that I'm going to suggest you do in about 30 seconds. Okay? I wrote my obituary. It was an interesting exercise. It was something we were doing with a bunch of friends, trying to figure out priorities in life. And I thought it was a simple thing to do. So I copied from the Philadelphia Inquirer a topic. And the format was name, so think to yourself, think your obituary. Your name, you know that part, right? Comma, what usually comes next? Age. Age. Age at which you died. Now my first thought was 100 and I thought, wait a minute, I've seen people that old. I don't think I want to be there. Okay? And so I challenge you, just take 30 seconds and say, if you were writing your obituary, and given what you know about your life and life in general, what would you like that number to be? How many picked the number of 100 or better? 2? Okay, that doesn't surprise me. I didn't pick 100. How many picked 90 or better? Those who have your hand up for 100, put it back up. 90 or better.
Always supposing good health.
No, you don't suppose anything. Look at what's going on around you. You don't know now, but if you had to vote, and this is what it was going to be, what would you pick? Over 90, how many? Interesting. I'll leave it right there. Doctor, take it from there.
Well, this was actually the study which was done by Dr. Bernie Seigel, which I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes about. This is exactly what the question he asked the people and how he could identify different types of patients. I was having lunch with Dr. Stephen Leach. I don't know, many of you might have met him, or maybe Celia has met him. He's a good friend, and he is also the director of clinical immunology at Temple University. I was telling him that I'm going to give a talk on how to live to be 100. And he said, what he said, they are not coming to hear a sermon from you, from a surgeon. So don't tell them, eat healthy, drink plenty of water, sleep well, do exercises. Neither are they interested in a lecture on pharmacology, on some new medications which are supposed to increase longevity and youth from a surgeon. What they are coming is, they are coming to hear your experiences with transplant patients. If you have something to share, or if you want a philosophy on death and your reflections on death. And that is what I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you about my passion to fight against death, because I see and think about death almost every day. It's my mission to fight death, and that's what I try to do. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about. It may be a little bit of a memoir. I'm going to speak to you from memory, and I'm going to talk to you about my impressions about death and how to fight it. Like I told you before, whatever I'm talking to you is going to apply to me too. So I'm not sitting on a pedestal, or on this side there is no disease and there is no death, only death is on that side. It's not true. So my aim is today to talk to you about the title, How to Live to Be 100. Just now there were only 2 hands that went up. When I finish this talk, now, today, I want all of you to have that burning desire to live for 100 years. That's my mission for today, to fill in your mind an intense desire to live for 100 years. Because to me, I think that is the most important. The rest will all fall into place. That is my thoughts. I'm going to, second thing that my mission is to help you find out the meaning of life from studies of Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl was, I don't know, many of you might have read his books and might have read his, this thing. He was a neurologist and a psychiatrist who was in the German concentration camp. He survived 4 concentration camps. He spent many years in Auschwitz, which was the most feared concentration camp. He survived. And while he was there, he was looking at people and prisoners who used to survive and those who used to die. And I'll touch briefly about what I learned from him and from his books and his writings. I also met another very famous and a very thoughtful doctor, a surgeon, a Yale University cancer surgeon. His name is Bernie Seigel. He wrote a very good book called Love, Medicine and Miracles. I was a changed doctor after I read that book. It completely changed. I have been trained to be a surgeon mechanic. He introduced me to a concept of surgeon, healer, psychotherapist, or logotherapist, whatever you call it, or a surgeon healer. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to be, a surgeon healer. That's my aim. These are the three aims that I have for today's talk. I'm going to talk to you, begin by telling you, I have given you one page, which is actually the real page of the Isha Upanishad. That's the mantra, which is the second mantra. Mantra is a Sanskrit word which has been incorporated into the Oxford Dictionary now and is being very popular in business words. This is the mantra. So mantra is a small aphorism in Sanskrit which is recited every day or every year, or it continuously, you can keep on saying it. Its idea is to have provoke thoughts and help you identify your life and to give it meaning. It gives meaning to your life. The Isha Upanishad, the Rishi writes in the second mantra, performing actions, live your life with a desire to live for 100 years. That is the only way. There is no other way. The word Upanishad, this was written 9,000 years before Christ. Probably India is the cradle of Indian civilization. It compels me, not because I am an Indian or I was born on that soil, but because when I look at so many civilizations, Sumerian, Macedonian, Egyptian, Roman civilizations, all these civilizations rose and they disappeared. But here is a civilization which is more ancient than any other civilization on planet Earth. And it is unbroken. It never disappeared. There is something. It was ruled by Islam for 400 years, but it is not an Islamic nation. It was ruled by the British for 300 years, but it did not become a Christian nation, although there were so many enthusiastic Christian missionaries propounding Christianity, but it did not absorb Christianity. It continued to remain a Hindu country. There was some vigor or something in that country which bewilders me. I don't know what it is, but I think it is probably these scriptures. 9,000 years before Christ, that was even before the word, before there was any script. There was no script. It was all this thing. So the word Upanishad means sitting nearby, and it is recited by the student and the teacher sit close to each other, and it is recited by, and it is passed on from generation to generation. I wondered, why did the Rishi write? What has that got to do with God? And what has that got to do with anything? Why is he insisting that I should live for 100 years or create a desire in my mind to live for 100 years? I found no answer. I read several commentaries by learned scholars, but I couldn't find any answer which gave me an answer as to why I should live for, create this desire. I will tell you now how slowly I evolved to that answer. I've been a cardiothoracic surgeon, like I told you, for more than 22 years now. And I have seen lots of patients. And different patients are varied. There are various types of patients. I found Dr. Bernie Seigel's classification of patients very much similar to my personal, it kind of was echoing my own experiences. There are exceptional patients and there are non-exceptional patients. These exceptional patients are those who are very proactive. They are enthusiastic. They are like partners with you. And they are responsible and they take enthusiastic interest in the care of their own life. and their own decisions in the treatment of their own management of their own disease. They are the survivors. They form about 15% of the patients. The other patients are non-exceptional. Some of them have 15% of these non-exceptional patients harbor a death wish, which may be masked, and sometimes it is conscious, sometimes it is unconscious. And they have given up hope on life. They have come to me, or they come to the surgeon, or they come to the doctor for a painless death. And these patients die. The other patients are compliant patients. They do exactly what the doctor tells them. They do what the nurses tell them. They keep appointments. They get all the tests done. They never ask questions. They never ask any challenging questions. And they expect the physicians and the nurses and the medical team to save them. These patients are saved. Many of them, if they have a prolonged course, die. They just give up. They give up. And these were the three types of groups of patients that I began to notice. And this, I was lucky to see that Bernie Seigel also mentions the same three groups. And also Dr. Starzl, if you read further down, Dr. Starzl also found these three groups of patients. Now I want to talk to you about Dr. Starzl. Dr. Starzl is the originator, I don't know if you all know, he is the originator of the first liver transplant done in the world. His research made liver transplantation an established procedure for end-stage liver disease. He wrote a book. The name of his autobiography was called The Puzzle People. On the first page of The Puzzle People, he writes this: every patient who received someone else's organ, single or multiple, was a puzzle. It was not the acquisition of new part or parts, but the rest of the body had to change before the gift could be accepted. And this was only the beginning. It is necessary for the mind to see the world in a different way. How the mental and physical parts work together was not predictable. He said many of the patients after transplantation died. Some of them found the world a better and a kinder place. Others found the world a cruel swamp in which their vulnerability was turned against them much more than they could have ever imagined. The good news is that everybody can be an exceptional patient and everybody can be a survivor. Both Dr. Starzl and Dr. Bernie Seigel felt that exceptional patients survived, no matter what. And how do you identify what kind of a patient you are? By the question that Jim asked you a few minutes ago. This was the question that was put to test by various people. And Dr. Seigel asked this question in his study. He asked the question, how many of you want to live for 100 years? I don't have that page, probably I'll have the page.
No, you back up there the page.
So,
I think it's the third page, maybe.
Page 3?
Yeah, that's on the third page.
okay.
After the A and B components.
It's not there, mine is a different one. Yeah, I can take one of them. So I don't miss out that important part chain. Yeah, Dr. Seigel in his study asked this question, how many of you, do you want to live to be 100? And he found that those who had the visceral yes response without any ifs, buts, no's, those were the ones which were exceptional patients, and they survived. These patients know that life comes with no guarantee. Most of the people said, yes, if I am ensured that I'm going to be healthy. But these exceptional survivors did not. They know that life comes with no guarantee.
Thank you.
The good news is that everybody is an exceptional patient. That's what my mission is, to show you how, my wish is that I want to show you how each of us can become exceptional patients.
Can you take a quick question?
Yeah.
Do you feel in general that transplant recipients are the first group of exceptional patients, the 15%?
I beg your pardon?
Do you feel in general that those who receive transplants are exceptional? In other words, would it be greater than 15% in the transplant community?
You mean they are exceptional patients?
You said that 15% of all patients
That we see.
Yeah. Do you feel that those who have received transplants are higher than 15%? Just by the fact that they went through the transplant experience. Does that make them higher?
Are transplant patients different than the normal population of patients? Or is the 15% there
Question
too?
you're asking.
That's the opposite.
Yes.
So they're more likely to be exceptional in general. And I was reading.
No, I mean, what I mean is that they have damaged their organs to such an extent that they have got an organ which is so badly damaged. Whereas other patients have not yet reached that stage where the organ has got so badly damaged. So they form a different group of patients which are much more harder than a person on whom I'm doing a coronary bypass or treating him for a valve replacement or has a degenerative valve disease. That is a different mindset. That psychology and the profile of that patient is different from that of a transplant patient. Transplant patients need more participation from the healthcare team for them to pull through and have a good, meaningful life.
Thank you.
But in the transplant group of patients, there are some patients who follow the exceptional patients, if I am answering your questions correctly.
Okay, thank you.
After this, I came across some studies by Dr. Viktor Frankl. Like I told you, he was a psychiatrist in the German concentration camp, and he was studying, in the camp, he was studying patients and prisoners who were surviving, and those prisoners who were not surviving. And he too also identified these two groups, the survivors and the non-survivors. In his conversation with the prisoners, he found that the prisoners had one great difficulty in dealing with that issue. And that issue was, they never knew when their suffering would end. They never knew when they will get out of the camp. They never thought when the war will end. They talked about it at every time they were doing any work or they were working on the tracks, they would talk amongst themselves and they would think the war would end tomorrow, day after, but it never ended. You could see that between December of 1944 and January, between this Christmas and New Year of 1944 and 1945, 1st of January, there were maximum deaths, not because the food supplies or anything, because they expected that they will be home by 1944 Christmas, and they could not. And lots of them just collapsed mentally, because they underwent what is known as a provisional existence of unknown limit. That's what Dr. Viktor Frankl has coined the word, provisional existence of unknown limit. What happens because of this? It is similar to a mental state of a person who has lost his employment and is not able to find a job, and he is in a provisional state, existence of unknown limit. Because of this, there is an altered time experience. What is that altered time experience? A small unit for a day seems to be very long, whereas a week seems to be short. This is the mental condition, and this is the perception of time amongst the prisoners. Because of this, what happens is that the patients lose hope in future. They lose their goals. They lose the vision of the future. And they enter into what is known as, what Frankl calls it as existential vacuum. That is once the person goes into existential vacuum, then it precipitates a crisis in that prisoner's life. And it begins usually in the morning when this prisoner refuses to get up in the morning. He will not get up, he will not go for a bath or a wash, and he will not go for his attendance parade. He will just lie there. And no matter what threats, requests you make, or you hit him, or with blows, he will not get up. He is beyond, he doesn't care. He will lie in his own excreta and then not move. After about a period of time, he gets up from his prostrated posture, takes out his well-hidden cigarette and smokes it and dies within the next 48 hours. And this is a picture which was consistent. All the prisoners could know it, and they were fearful of their, not for themselves, but for their friends, that they should not come into this spell of existential vacuum. How is this important to us? It is important to us because the moment you have an intense desire to live for 100 years, you cannot have a provisional existence of unknown limit, because you begin to think that this provisional existence is finite. There cannot be an existential vacuum. It's just not possible. And therefore you will never lose the meaning to your life. You will always give meaning to your life. And that is why, for me, I am used to respecting the Rishi, but I really find that a man wrote 9,000 years ago that live your life with the intense desire to live for 100 years. That is a sure shot antidote for this kind of death. So I have traced to you in that paragraph over here the desire to live for 100 years. There is no experience of provisional existence. There is no, because you always view every suffering as finite. There is no distorted time experience. There is no existential vacuum, and therefore you will always have a meaning. You will always look forward to the future, and you will have a future goal, and you will survive. After reading these studies of Dr. Frankl, the more I thought about it, the more this seems to be true. And I am today deeply convinced that I must myself, in my own heart, create an intense desire to live for 100 years. Now the question that stood before me is, what can I do to make the non-exceptional patients exceptional? And is it my job as a surgeon? I've been trained to be a surgeon mechanic. Is it my job? Am I supposed to, or should I report to the psychiatrist? Or should I report to the psychologist, the patients, to help them create this meaningful life?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why do you call yourself a mechanic? You say you call yourself a surgeon mechanic. You've done it a couple of times. Why do you call yourself a mechanic?
That's what we are trained to, look upon the body as a disease machine. And that's the inherent part of your education. I'm not blaming anybody or anything. I'm just saying that most of us, surgeons, physicians, they don't look into, that's why I've come, the third part of the section I have showed you that we don't have to be surgeon mechanic. We have to be a doctor where my hands and heart, my head and hands is used in the treatment and the act of doing the surgery, but I should also be involved with the patient, and I should also help the patient give meaning to her life. This was previously, or most of my colleagues relegate this task to the psychologist or to the psychiatrist. They will not sit down with you and talk to you for more than 10-15 minutes. In fact, so there are surgical studies, the average time spent by surgeons with the patient is not exceeding 18 seconds. Before he will interrupt you and ask you what do you want and what is your problem and have you have any symptoms or not. There are not one, there are several hundred studies like that. Because the surgeon wants to get into the operating room, he wants to do the act of surgery and he wants to get out. That's his training. Therefore I am using to refer to this training as surgeon. And in fact I have a slide from the movie Malice. I have brought that computer to show you that. That is the perfect picture of a surgeon mechanic. Of course, it is Alec Baldwin talking about it, but that is, then he talks about the God complex. I'm sure you must have seen that. So that is the epitome of the surgeon mechanic. Now therefore, after looking at all these thoughts, I had two questions in my mind. One is, how do I make a non-exceptional patient exceptional? And the second is this my job? Or should I delegate this job to the psychologist? I will answer the second question first. I began to think that every patient has got a physical component and he has got and they have a mental component. I have two quotations, one from Dr. Bernie Seigel. Mental component of a disease makes it imperative that all physicians be enlightened as much and must be at peace with themselves as a good psychotherapist. This is what Dr. Seigel wrote. After meeting him, I was a different person, after I read all his books. And then Dr. Jung says in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams and Reflections, says, just as the physicians are using X-rays without knowing about the subatomic physics, so too the surgeons must use other specialities in the care of their patients. I was convinced by both these arguments that I have to look not only at the body of the patient, but I have to look beyond the patient into what the person is. I have to see the disease and the person. I was convinced about that. William Osler is the father of modern medicine. He wrote the first textbook in medicine. He formed the first description of the disease as is described in modern textbooks. And he is also the founder and chair of the Johns Hopkins University. One of his sentences was, I am more interested in what the patient's mind has than what his lungs have, in respect to the outcomes to tuberculosis. And that's the quotation I have put over here for reflection. It was always my thought, and this is always, I'm convinced by what he said, that what is going on in the patient's mind is more important than what is going on in his lungs. Not only William Osler, Hippocrates, one of the most first surgeons, he said, I would rather know what sort of a person is getting the disease than what sort of a disease the person has. Thus, I started to look upon myself as a surgeon healer, or started thinking. So the answer to the first question is that I must help. The answer to the first question. Now I'm going to answer the first question. Is how can I help? Obviously, the first thing is to create a desire to live for 100 years, and that's why this talk, and that's why I'm here doing this talk. That I want to create in your mind a desire to live for 100 years. If all of you walk out from here with this one sentence written on your mind, that I want to live for 100 years, my purpose and my preparation for this talk is fulfilled. I want each one of you to walk off from here with the desire in your mind to live for 100 years. It's a mantra. Say it again and again, and you will find it having effect, and far-reaching effect in your life. Obviously, whether you try it or not, obviously you will find out the meaning to your life by itself, because what Dr. Frankl says, by creating a goal, which will lead to an achievement, or creating an experience. You want to travel, you want to see beauty, you want to see love, you want to see goodness, you want to see truth, you want to experience life, you will be able to do that. And that gives you meaning to your life. And the last thing is, if you are having a prolonged period of suffering, you have to see the meaning in that suffering. And you have to know that it is finite, and that it does not offset any future goals. Dr. Viktor Frankl asked one of the questions to all his fellow prisoners, what is it that you have lost irreparably? You can get back your money, you can get back your health, you can get back your social position, you can get back everything once you're out of the camp. These were the survivors. They survived the camps. Francis Peabody said, the treatment of disease may be entirely impersonal, but the care of the patient must be entirely personal. The secret of patient care is truly caring for the patient. Before I draw my conclusions, I want to tell you one story. The story is of this lady sitting in front of me. Celia Sanchez. She's a 52-year-old Hispanic lady who was so sick on the day before the transplantation. She was listed for right lung transplantation. We evaluated the donor, but the donor's lung was infected, the right lung was infected. So I called the team which was getting the left lung, and I requested them saying that our patient has collapsed and is intubated. She had collapsed in the operating room. She was already on the ventilator, and that would mean that her window for transplantation is closing. I requested the surgeon of the other team, and he was very kind, and he said, sure, you can take the other lung. So we decided to do a left lung transplantation. She was not able to oxygenate because of her disease was so progressed. Her LAS scores were more than 90, and she was not able to oxygenate, so we had to use the heart-lung machine to do her surgery. She was against the HLA cross-match because the donor was not becoming available for her because she had lots of antibodies. So we used a special protocol which was called as Temple B protocol. It is published in literature as Temple B protocol for immunomodulation. After I did the immunomodulation, even after doing the immunomodulation, she was okay. The lung was started functioning, the surgery was over, but it functioned for only 1 hour. And after that, the lung stopped working, and I had to put her on an ECMO. It was ECMO is an extracorporeal machine, extracorporeal oxygenator. It is an artificial lung. I mean, it was hard for me to come to Jackie and tell her that your mother may not make it, because immunologically, hyperacute rejection is the immunological name for death. I spent 3 days in the intensive care, sitting here watching her bleeding and watching her rejection. 3 days later, I discontinued her. I had to shift her to the operating room, out of the operating room because chest open. And I watched her bleeding for 3 days, and I watched her, I removed the ECMO after 3 days. Her lung had started functioning, it was recovering, it was oxygenating. And then, after 6 days, I closed the chest. On the 12th day, she received a tracheostomy. And by 30th day, she was ready to go home. I saw her every day for 2 days, twice a day. One day, Celia told me, it was a Sunday morning, I don't know if she remembers. She said, go out, doctor, today is a great day, have fun, I'll be okay. She taught me several Spanish words and sentences. So much so that in the office when I said, hasta luego, everybody said, baby. She is the first patient in Temple in the last more than 13 years who has been weaned of an ECMO and has lived to tell the tale. She is the first, one of the few survivors in the world of a hyperacute rejection. In fact, Dr. Leach and myself are publishing a paper on her. What do I want from Celia today? I want her to go from this room with an intense desire to live for 100 years. Today you can see she's walking without oxygen, without this thing. I was impressed by one of the studies which Dr. Bernie Seigel has referred to in his book. He says when a physician sits in the patient's room for 1 minute, the patient perceives it as 15 minutes. But when he stands over there for 1 minute and talks to the patient perceives it as only 15 seconds. This was a great learning for me, and after reading this sentence, I have never stood at the door of the patient. I always go and pull up a chair and sit down. I'm sure Sandra would also notice that. So, I want to conclude by saying what the Rishi said 9,000 years before Christ. Live your life with the intense desire to live for 100 years. Repeat this mantra again and again, and it will serve you. It will make you a survivor. It will help you to find the meaning of your life. Mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body. Nietzsche, the German philosopher, said, he who has the why will always be able to bear any how. Dr. Bernie Seigel called his book Love, Medicine and Miracles. He didn't have the courage, which I am going to say, that the book shouldn't be called Love, Medicine and Miracles. The title should have been Love in Medicine Will Produce Miracles, as Celia Sanchez is a miracle.
Thank you.
It's going to be hard for anybody to ask a question after that, but somebody's going to have to start with the first
I
question.
do have a question. How does your feelings apply in the case of progressive degenerative disease? My brother suffers from Parkinson's, my twin brother suffers from Parkinsonism. And I can see his defeatist attitude every time I talk to him. It drives me nuts. His helplessness just comes through the phone. How do you create this desire to live 100 years in a disease which is degenerative? The Parkinson's getting worse. You start the medicine, for a while it works, and you have to start taking more and more medicine for Parkinsonism. After a while the medicine doesn't help at all. And the shaking gets worse, and the stumbling gets worse, and the mental debilitation gets worse. I'd like to be able to help him in some way with this. I don't know how. How can I help him? How can I help him?
You can help him by, that's what I would do. Every disease has a component that, from childhood where if I'm not well, if I have a flu, my mother is more attentive to the flu. I get more exercise, I get a day off, I get lots of special privileges. So lots of people may have a small component of having a disease which has its own way of dealing with people in life. So what you can do is help him is to listen to his complaints and let him vent his thoughts and be a person who you communicate to him that you care. And that will help him more than any medications and will prevent the regression of his disease.
I do that to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then you can tell him this. And he will find the meaning. And he will be able to do a lot of things. Like a person, there is a case report of a boy who had a vehicular accident and he became a quadriplegic. And people were thinking that whether he should be having euthanasia or not. And he said no. And he found meaning in his life. And he started doing things, he started using his mouth. He couldn't move his hands or his legs. So everybody has a way of finding meaning. And we can give meaning to our lives.
I just want to be able to get rid of that helplessness of his. Like God and life is against me, there's nothing I can do, I'm helpless. I hate that thought.
Correct. Now in Indian continent, Indian culture, there is a little advantage. The advantage is that the Hindu paradigm of looking at a human being is different from that in the West. Now I may think that I am this body, this mind and this intellect, and I may think that that is Dr. Thacker. But in India that is not me. I am truly the consciousness, this body, mind and intellect is a non-self. It's a different paradigm of looking. So lots of people who suppose a person who is now, suppose I am 73 years old and I have Parkinson's disease and I am not able to do functionally, then I have one great mission in life and one great meaning is that I have to identify that divine spark in me. And most of the Indian people, or I have seen that, they focus their attention. So they'll have group discussions, they will sit down and talk about it, they'll talk about meditation practices and all that. And their purpose then becomes to be awake to the fourth state of consciousness. The Western world knows only two states of consciousness, conscious and subconscious. The Eastern world thinks of consciousness as three states. There is a state of waking state, a dream state, and a deep sleep state. Three states, and there is a fourth state of consciousness, which is called where you perceive yourself as consciousness, as divinity, as consciousness, or as intelligence, or as local intelligence in the words of Einstein, and non-local intelligence. So the Hindu concept is that you are living in consciousness, just as you are living in air and there is air in your body, right? There is space in your body and you are existing in space. Similarly, there is consciousness in you and you are existing in consciousness, which is subtler than air.
Thank you. Sorry to take so much time.
You were just explaining on that. If you look into the history of Native American, it's the same philosophy.
Yes.
They're part of nature. We don't own it, we share it.
Yes.
And what I've been through, my grandfather when I was little, he said, I'm going to be 113. Well, let's be a teenager again. And when he died in 72, he was 93 years old. And I said to myself, I'm going to try and beat you. My father, we all have the same name, he died at 52, but he was a heavy drinker. After World War II, he was in prisoner of war for 9 months, the last 9 months of the war. So I don't know what emotionally happened to him, but and then my mother died right after he got home. I was 4 when my mother died. And I've always, Indian culture, American Indian, and Native American culture, I've always believed in that.
That's interesting.
Because, and I'm still here. I've been through a lot myself.
That's great.
I survived running drugs for 9 months. My gangrene had gallbladder during that whole 9 months. They drained that and replaced that and removed it. And this was all 05 to 06. So here it is.
You told me that you had several operations.
And then I
survived all of them.
I had hernia operations afterwards because of the tubing in there. I had triple ventral by Dr. Harbison, and I had a groin hernia after that. We're still here, and I still go with the flow. You can't beat nature. You just got to go with the flow and hope for the best.
That's the classic description of an exceptional patient.
Other questions?
I have learned something from this message tonight.
Thank you.
I am a member of an extremely large family.
Large family.
Very, very large. There has been a lot of longevity in my family. Every member of my mother's family, 13, all lived to be at least 90 years old. I now have an uncle that is 98 and a half years old. Even though I have had a heart transplant, after listening to your conversation tonight, I still believe that I can live to be 99 years old, to beat the uncle that's 98 and a half.
But he's still going, you know. I forgot to tell you one point. The miracles you may think, and lots of physicians and statistics will be shown to you that the 5-year survival, 10-year survival curves are showing this. But I want to assure you that every individual is larger than any statistics. All these statistics don't measure what is not measurable, like the thoughts. I am a statistic on paper, but what my thoughts are is not on the paper. It's not measurable. So we should make sure that when we look at statistics, the measurable should not push out what is important. I mean, Celia's patient, I'll give you her example. that she had many donor-specific antibodies, which would mean that she should be throwing off that organ. But clinically, she was improving every day. And every week, Dr. Leach kept on checking her PRAs. And then the PRAs would show she has so much donor-specific antibodies. So should we go ahead and do plasmapheresis? And I would say, well, she's clinically improving. She's walking. And we never did. So we'll wait one more week. She waited one more week. And she waited one more week. And then, one day Dr. Leach called and said, her PRAs are high. How is she doing? I said, she's gone.
Challenge every day till the day came that you got what you were there for.
That is exactly what Dr. Seigel calls it as a provisional existence.
Sure.
And that leads to exactly what your friend, now I can't do it anymore. So if you, the antidote to that, in my understanding, is that if you have a desire to live for 100 years, then each day becomes a finite experience. And not able to get a donor for 2 years will be a finite period in your life. Because you have programmed your life for 100 years. And it's not possible for things not to happen in 100 years.
And
I want to echo what Harold just said, because after what he just said, it really is like that. If any of us, I was in the hospital for 5.5 months, and I had the same experience as Peter, but I never even equated it to being in a prison or war camp. But basically, that's what it's like. Not that severe, but I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, but the cycle was the same. The body, they were totally emaciated.
Absolutely.
They were just like skin. I'm sure you must have seen their pictures in the Holocaust. It's incredible. I mean, it's unbelievable.
see, I had one other thought as you talk, and that is that we would sit down as people waiting, talking to the transplant coordinators. Every once in a while, we would go after them and say, how long is this new heart going to last? And they used to give us statistical answers, 12, 7, and when I was there 11 years ago, the number was like 7 years. Well, I've already passed it, and I keep going, But the thing is, people were putting deadlines. They weren't thinking about me living to 100. I was 63 at the time. They were saying, okay, he'll make it to 70. Somehow you have to live beyond what they're telling you,
Absolutely.
So I think it's probably a bad idea to
What
tell
they are
them.
telling you is statistics, and Sandra must say, I evaluated her. I didn't talk to her about any survival statistics. I told her probably that you are bigger than any statistic. And it depends on how you want to.
It's a good idea not to use those things on people waiting. In retrospect, I would have, of course, when you're waiting, you say, how long we're going to have, because at that moment, you take a week,
I think the quoting and the reading of the statistics, we all heard at 5 years, such and such a percentage was still alive, and at 10 years, such and such a percentage was alive. You don't really hear 15 and 20 years, but for me and a lot of other transplant recipients I know, the 5th year is a big deal, and the 10th year is a big deal, because you pass that landmark. Because we all heard those statistics. 5 years, so many are still alive, and 10 years, so many are still alive. So it's like, it's a big anniversary.
It helps you to.
But the 9th year and the 11th year are just as big a deal, but it's like that 5th year and 10th year. Now I'm past the statistics, you never heard what's lasting 15 years later, so.
That's right, because the study was concluded at 10 years, so. And besides, statistics are useful only in determining the therapy. Whether we should do transplant or we should not do transplant. Is it medical? Then statistics help you to guide you. But does it apply to me? A cancer surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon had distant metastasis with all in their in his peritoneum. When the surgeon went, they said it's a non-resectable tumor, and that you may have at the most 6 months to survive. This was told to an orthopedic surgeon. An orthopedic surgeon lived for 10 years and wrote a book, How to Live with Cancer. So, I am seeing patients who spontaneous regression. There are lots of women who have a tumor and then it disappears. And then we say that's spontaneous regression. It It's a slow-growing tumor, and it goes out of the statistics. And no surgeon is interested in that patient.
Doctor? So your mantra here should eliminate any possible depression.
Yes. That's it. This is 18 mantras which describe the way to God. The Rishi tells you in 18 mantras how to realize the divinity within you. I will just tell you the 18th, second mantra.
What is the name? Rishi? R-I-S-H-I?
Rishi. R-I-S-H-I. Rishi. Rishi is a person who, like you have the priest in the church, a Rishi is a person who has experienced that he is a divine, that he is the consciousness.
I'm looking for 18 mantras. Go online and look for this.
Yeah, Isha Upanishad, yeah.
All right, I will.
That's it. So you will never find any names anywhere.
Look on page 2,
Did that show it? Okay.
third paragraph.
She
Alright.
wants to comment.
Okay, thank you.
Creo que yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que dice. Tener optimista, no deprimirse y pensar siempre, hacer trabajo, tener fe en Dios. También yo entiendo que todas las personas que estaban a mi alrededor, tanto el equipo completo, el team completo, ellos siempre van a ser
She's saying that she agrees with everything that you said today as far as having faith, staying positive, and knowing that everyone that's around you is for you. Therefore, that gives you the drive, that's for her as well as for the doctors, nurses, the entire team. It gives you the drive to know that you're going to survive and go beyond, as you said,
It's a statistic.
I'm sorry.
It's a tough word for me.
Yeah.
Yo nunca voy a olvidar el 7 de noviembre a las 3 de la tarde cuando la doctora Pastera y el equipo padecimiento querían hacer matar a mí. Sin embargo, ellos dijeron que me iban a mantener con más porque entendían que yo tenía derecho a vivir. Pero que yo también entendía y dije que yo iba a vivir con la ayuda de Dios y la ayuda de Él.
She said that she would never remember the day prior to her transplantation when Dr. Patel and the entire team came to her and said that there was basically like nowhere else to go because of her progression that night, and that they told her that prior to the transplantation she would be, on life support.
Yeah, mentally.
And that made her realize that yes, she's going to be on life support, but that also gave her the drive to say, okay, that I'm going to be on there, but she's going to work at her best to go beyond that, to live, beyond this life support, that was going to be one of her strengths so that she can think further than that.
Y voy a vivir porque quiero ser el punto de referencia de hombres como él, que junto a Dios devuelven la vida a los que necesitan. Yo necesito vivir por Dios, por ustedes que son mis hijas, por mi madre que tiene 89 años y porque la ciencia ha dado un paso gigantesco junto con Dios.
She also says that she is going to continue to live to prove that everything that Dr. Thacker said today is true, and she also has to live for herself, us who are her daughters, her mother, my grandmother who's lived to be 86, and for everyone that has been in her life and that has helped her to get to where she is today.
Siempre que tiene deseo de vivir, tiene fe y no se deprime y cree lo que te dicen los médicos y hace lo que te dicen, tu vida va a ir.
She says everyone who believes, has faith, who follows through as far as surgeons, nurses, any medical team and follow what they say, you will always have the desire to live and to move on in life.
Gracias y voy a vivir 100 años.
She says thank you and she will live to be 100.
Giving meaning to your life, for love, for this thing, for relations, for country, for church, for other transplant patients,
Gracias.
She has one other thing in her favor. She has an exceptionally strong maternal instinct.
Yeah.
And that, you can't explain that or find that anywhere other than when you actually see it happen.
It's amazing to me all the time.
I mean, I've seen
Women have got such tremendous...
women have an accident with a baby, and they have the baby and everything, and then they come and everything's fine. So it's a maternal instinct kicks in on women. And on men, it's a survival instinct.
Doctor, do you believe in what is known as a force or energy that you can tap into in order to, well, I'll use the word, live longer in that sense?
I do. In fact, that is exactly what I'm telling you, that the Indian paradigm is that you are not the body. You are that energy, that consciousness, that intelligence, and that is what is going to heal you. That I am cutting, I know when I cut the skin, I know that the skin is going to heal, but I don't know how why it heals. I only know how it heals. So I know that I trust that intelligence, that energy to heal. Therefore, I can cut with impunity. I do believe that.
Doctor, I think what you're saying tonight is something that we all realize in a different way. We have our own ambitions, we have our own way of dealing with things, and we have commitments to family, to loved ones, to ourselves. But I think maybe you just gave us a different approach in looking at that. So I think we've all shared a lot of what you're saying. We've never really said the mantra this many times or something, but we have our own commitments to survive.
Of course. To be very honest, my experience was just like yours. It's anecdotal. It's just falling in places. It's when Jim told me that, what are you going, and I was driving and I didn't know what is you are passionate about. That was his question. And I am passionate about, I think about it all the time, fighting death. And I was thinking, what is the way in which I can help my patients live the longest and the happiest? And that was the passion that was uppermost in my mind. This beautiful coherence of all these little factors that I have put together today is because I was preparing for this talk. I didn't have it as clear today as I have it today 7 days ago. It's just that I've been reading Viktor Frankl again and again. In these 7 days, I read his book 3 times. I read the Upanishads, and I read Bernie Seigel's book, which I had read many years ago. I read it again. And then I started thinking as to how to make sense about what is genuine to live. I don't think that there is any pill which makes you live longer. And why did I read that sentence and not forget it in my life? This I have read it 10 years ago, and it has been always in my mind. Why did the Rishi say that? I have to tell you that. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question? I'm sitting back here and I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, the way modern medicine is today, is 100 just the starting point?
I beg your pardon?
The way modern medicine is today, is it possible that 100 is just the starting point? Where you can go
Beyond.
past beyond?
Oh yeah, it is possible.
I mean, because you hear of some of these issues where people live to be 120, 130 years old.
Yeah. I have a picture in this thing of a lady who is 104 years old. She's absolutely healthy and she's doing one puja, one Indian lady. There is one Japanese doctor whose picture also I have somewhere, who is 107 years old and who goes and does consultation. He's a family physician.
Wow.
People come and talk to him. He's 107 years old. Dr. Michael DeBecki. In fact, I have his slide which I have prepared for him. 1908 to 2008. He's a cardiac surgeon.
Sure.
So what I did to give you the message, what I have made a slide, is of a slide of my picture. And on that I have written next to it, 1954 to 2054. Exactly like that. So that, I want you to do that. I want you to do that, like Michael Tibet's picture, but he's no more, but that's what I would. So that is a reminder to me that I have to be living for 100 years.
I have to say that Dr. Thacker stopped into our family.
I was there.
Not just preaching to everybody, not just you. Dr. Thacker stopped into our family a week ago yesterday and said, what do you people want me to talk about? And I don't think we came up with many good ideas. You did very well on your own. You did sort of.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a last burning question?
Last question, Doctor. In 2054, we'll read your obituary.
I'll be around to read it.
Let me know how it turns out.
I'll be around to read it.
That'd be great.
I'm going to leave you with one final challenge. We start off an exercise up front where we talked about your obituary. Name, comma, age, comma, and the next part of that particular model I took out of Philadelphia Inquirer was 2 or 3 words to sum up that person's life. And I got to tell you, when I did that, I thought this was a simple exercise. It took me probably about 20 minutes to come up with the number. And it took me another hour to try and figure out what 3 words would I like to have on my obituary to sum up my life. And I'll leave you with that thought. As a follow-on, after 100 years, what would you like those couple words to say? The story goes on below, but summarize it in 2-3 words. That's a hell of a challenge. The other part of that experience, if I may share it with you, was to start writing it. And again, I had a model in front of me. And so Joe Blow had died at such an age. How did he die? How would you like to die if you had a choice? I first said, just go to sleep and not wake up. I thought, you know what? That wasn't really me. And so I came and thought about a way that I'd like to die, going out with style, okay? And then the next part was an interesting one, too. He worked for such and such company for X number of years. I was working at the time, I thought, I never even thought about retirement. How long do I want to work before I live the rest of my life not in the working world? I give you that as an exercise to take what he's taught here, and that mantra, home with you, to take that beyond. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Thacker. It was an amazing talk.